Aloha, I'm Lahaina Lee, and welcome to the Maui Real Estate Advisor series on buying, selling, and investing in Maui real estate. Today, our focus is going to be on using 1031 exchanges to build wealth, minimize taxes, and create a real estate legacy in such a way that it keeps peace in the family. But first, the legal stuff. This presentation and any accompanying materials are for informational purposes only. The material is provided without any warranty or guarantee of its accuracy, completeness, or results from using the information. You should consult your own legal, financial, and/or tax advisor and verify all information to your satisfaction before taking action. This will be the first in a series of podcasts where we'll discuss a number of tactics and strategies around 1031 exchanges. So, let's get to it. First, what is a 1031 exchange? Well, the IRS Code, Section 1031, allows investors to defer capital gains tax on the sale of investment properties when purchasing a replacement property within a specific time frame. So the code allows you to sell real property and defer the payment of capital gains tax if you use the proceeds to buy a like-kind property. Seek advice from your CPA. We'll get into what a like-kind property is in just a few minutes. But first, why would you want to do this? What are the advantages of a 1031 exchange? Well, think about this. You can either sell your investment property and pay the capital gains taxes to the feds, the state where the property is located, and maybe the state where you live. Or you can pay zero capital gains and defer those capital gains to much, much later, or possibly never. Now, a long time ago, we had a CPA and we were selling a property. And it was before I really knew very much about a 1031 exchange. I just knew that there was such a thing as a 1031 exchange. So we asked him if we should do a 1031 exchange when we sold an investment property. And his advice at the time was, no, it's really kind of complicated to do a 1031 exchange and the taxes are fairly low right now, so just pay it and you never have to worry about it again. And that's what we did. But think about this. If you own a property on Maui that you bought a few years ago, or gosh, maybe a lot of years ago, it wouldn't be unusual for that property to be valued today at $1 million or more. So if you sold that property today, capital gains is going to take a chunk of that. It's really going to take a bite out of your profit. But if you defer that, well, what are the rates? The federal rates for long-term capital gains are 15 to 20%, and the Hawaii tax rate for long-term capital gains is 7.25%. So that might turn out to be $200,000, $300,000 or more, depending on what you've sold. So you can either take that money, reinvest it in another piece of real estate, and continue to earn income, rental income, and appreciation, or you can pay that, and poof, it's gone. And there are a lot of places in the U.S. right now where you can buy a house or invest in real estate with $200,000 or $300,000. Another advantage or strategy for a 1031 exchange is to replace a non-performing property or relocate your investment into one or more properties in a different market that better fits your goals. So if you think about owning property here on Maui, especially short-term rentals, well, 2020s have been pretty hard on us, right? So we started off with COVID. So rental income was zero or next to zero. Then we had kind of a roller coaster ride. Things got pretty good. And then we had the big disaster here, and tourism sort of fell to almost zero and really hasn't recovered that well. So this might be an opportunity to sell the non-performing property and either relocate that to another market or buy multiple properties somewhere else. Now, we've always had people who have sold here on Maui. We had one fellow who sold a house here on Maui, bought 3 properties in Texas. So those will be on to his kids one day. And we had sort of the flip side. We had a lady who sold a warehouse up in Seattle and bought a number of condos here on Maui. And the strategy is those are going to go to her kids someday. And in the meantime, she's earning income and building equity. Now, if you're thinking about this as a long term strategy, well, what are the advantages if you continue to defer capital gains through 1031 exchanges? Well, the first thing that comes to mind is you can defer the taxes and liquidate, perhaps when you're in a lower tax bracket. Now, if you're really thinking long term, think about this. Your heirs can inherit the property on what's called the stepped up basis and pay no capital gains tax upon your demise. So, the thing about this is, you've heard there are always 2 things in life that are sure things: death and taxes. But what this shows is that the taxes part are not as certain. So it can be an excellent tax planning strategy, and it's a great way to pass on generational wealth. Of course, if you're going to transfer wealth, well, first you have to build wealth. And so we've seen this used a lot of times for people to buy a property, pay down the mortgage, get some appreciation, sell that property, and either upgrade to a better property, let's say from a C class to maybe a B class, or sell one property, take the proceeds, and buy 2 properties, and then just multiply that over time. That's sort of do the exchange, rinse, and repeat strategy, right? Sounds pretty good. Something we see here, maybe a little bit more on Maui and probably some other kind of resort markets, is somebody buying a rental property here, maybe their dream home, the ideal place where they want to spend the rest of their lives, buy that, rent it for a number of years, and then move into the property eventually. Another use for a 1031 exchange. So that kind of leads us to what exactly is a like kind property. Now, this is probably one of the most misunderstood sections that we really discuss with people. I've had people come here and say, I'd really like to buy a property on Maui, but I own a ranch in Montana and I don't really want to buy another ranch here in Hawaii. And the thing is, a like kind exchange is pretty much just real estate for real estate. And there are a number of types of properties that can qualify as like kind. For example, you could sell a single family home and buy a condo. You could sell a condo and buy a duplex. You could buy vacant land. You could buy multifamily, um, office space, hospitality, fractional ownership, so tenants in common. Um, my wife had for a while a part of a strip mall in a tenants in common. And then there are things you wouldn't even think about: cell towers, solar farms, oil and mineral rights, and moorings, be something here, even a cemetery plot. And what if you just don't want to buy another piece of real estate that just you own? Well, we'll talk about Delaware statutory trust here in just a minute. But first, there are some exclusions. Exclusions include personal property, a leasehold property that has less than 30 years remaining on the lease, and also properties that are outside the United States or its territories. So, Delaware Statutory Trust, in 50 words or less, what is a DST? Well, it's a trust set up to hold prime commercial real estate. So, the kinds of real estate that are held in a DST are like major warehouses, like Amazon warehouses, medical centers, retirement facilities, so large commercial properties. And the way you own those is you own just a fraction of the property. So it's kind of like a tenants in common on steroids. Now, a couple of things. First of all, I cannot sell a Delaware statutory trust. That is actually a security. And so it has to go through somebody who specializes in that. So we work with a lot of those folks and we can kind of help get you in those directions. There are advantages and there are disadvantages, and there are a lot of disclaimers around them. So we'll do a whole nother episode on that. Moving on. If you go to our blog, you'll see sort of a recap of FAQs, and one of them is a question: is it a good time to do a 1031 exchange? Well, maybe we should rephrase that and ask, when is a good time to do a 1031 exchange? Well, it might be a good time if you have a significant amount of equity and you want to either upgrade or increase your portfolio or relocate the asset. So, relocating the asset is something we're seeing more. We've already talked about the fellow who sold property here on Maui and also on Oahu and relocated all of those asset dollars to Texas, bought multiple homes. His kids are going to live there, and someday they'll actually inherit that property. We also know people who are, let's say, of a certain age where maybe cash flow is more important than appreciation. Some of those folks are looking at selling a property here that has had good appreciation and the cash flow is not so great right now to another location or another kind of property where the cash flow is better. And speaking of stages of life, one of the questions we get is, can I sell a property and exchange into a lower price property and take out some cash? I'd kind of like to take a trip around the world and I'd like to have some money to do that. Can you do that? Well, the answer is yes. And here's the thing. Let's say you wanted to sell a property here that's worth $1 million, and you want to reinvest into another property that's only $900,000 and take out the $100,000 difference. Well, you can do that, but you're going to owe tax on it. So that's called a boot. That's the technical term, and there's a long story behind that. But in any event, you would owe tax only on the difference. The rest of that would be protected and deferred. And so what I'm hoping that you can see here is that you can strategically use 1031 exchanges to plan to meet your goals now, help your family with real estate, and create a financial plan and leave a legacy. And so what's the best way to plan a 1031 exchange? Well, first of all, have a plan. My advice is work with experts to identify your long-term goals and your investment strategy. So that's going to include your financial planner, CPA, maybe a trust attorney, and we can help with the real estate. Now, if you're selling something here on Maui, we're going to advise you to start searching for replacement properties as we're getting ready to sell the property. Now, if you want to sell something here and buy something somewhere else in the U.S., we have connections around the country that we can help you get connected with. We can help you with Delaware Statutory Trust. Typically, you have up to 45 days to identify properties, and you have up to 180 days to close on those properties. Also, in some cases, you can use something that's called a reverse 1031 exchange. And we're going to advise you, once again, to work with your CPA, a financial planner, and maybe an attorney. All right, so those are answers to some pretty high-level questions. We'll take a deeper dive into this in future episodes. So if you like this episode, then like it and hit the button to subscribe, send it to a friend. And of course, we'd love to hear from you. So if you have comments or questions, drop them into the section below. So that's it for now. We'll see you next time. And from the greatest island on earth, this is Lahaina Lee saying aloha. Tony Brown produced this podcast. The information provided in this podcast is for educational and informational purposes only. It's not intended as a recommendation to invest in real estate or any other financial asset. We are not financial planners, certified public accountants, or attorneys. You should consult with a qualified professional before making any financial, legal, or investment decisions. All investments carry risk, and past performance is not indicative of future results.